Hi guys, welcome to November's Dispatches. It's going to be a very hectic month, a lot happening, and we've just come through another hectic month. As you may know, we were over in Texas at the Round Top Fair. Towards the end of the month, we're there for 10 days in Texas. That was fantastic. We met a lot of old friends that they're taking the trouble to come to Round Top to visit us, and I like to think we made a lot of new friends, many of whom had never seen a toy soldier figure in their lives, because as you know, toy soldier shops are like hen's teeth, they're so rare. So for many people, the last knowledge or perhaps memory they've ever had of toy soldiers were either little green army men, the little plastic ones, or nothing at all. So this was a chance for us to introduce King and Country to a whole new audience, and that's what we did. Terrific experience, a lot of hard work, because not only were we presenting King and Country, we were selling King and Country as well. We put together what I like to think were some great displays, and certainly they were appreciated by all the people that came to our stand and spoke to us, and in many cases bought figures for the very first time. So great experience. But what made it even better on this trip was after the Round Top show, I had the opportunity to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and then on to Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, obviously those two places are very much in the news as we speak because of the US election. And at this moment, I'm filming this on the 6th of November. It's going to go out on the 17th. We don't know what the result of the election will be. However, that didn't have any effect on the visit I had to Atlanta and to Charlotte. The reason I'd gone to these two places were a couple of our very big King Country collectors had kindly invited me to visit them. So in the case of Atlanta, that was a gentleman called Craig Warner, who I've met many years before, but we met up again at the Chicago show last year, and Craig very kindly extended an invitation to see his collection, which is fairly extensive, especially World War II. And so I took that opportunity to go to a place I've never been to before, which was fantastic. But also I had the opportunity to visit Historic Sales, which is one of our top US dealers, and they publish a series of, you could say, magazines throughout the year, mail order company, and I'd never been to their warehouse, but I had met the boss of the company, Mr. Howard Fox, who's a great guy to deal with, and his man that deals with us, David Burns. So Howard and David made myself and Craig, who drove me to meet them, because their headquarters are also in the outskirts of Atlanta, and it made me think the value of these visits, because it's not just to shake hands and look at sales or what have you, but a chance to sort of pick the brains of the people that collect and the people that sell our product, and that we did over several days. Well, once we'd finished in Atlanta, and my friend Craig also drove both of us all the way up to Charlotte, North Carolina, to visit Mr. Alfred D'Ambrosio. Alfred, or Fred as he likes to be called, again is a collector of King and Country of long standing. He collects a few other things, but he's primarily a K&C collector. And so we had a chance to stay with him, but we also had another opportunity to meet a brand new, well I say brand new collector, brand new to me, but actually he's been a collector of King and Country for a long time, Mr. Dan Nance. And Dan is not only a superb military history artist, a painter, but he's also a great diorama builder. And in his office were no less than 9 separate rooms filled with amazing dioramas. I mean, to mention just a couple, there was the Normandy diorama, which was showing the beaches, or one of the beaches, I think in this case it was mostly Omaha, and some of the inland around Normandy, filled an entire room. Another was an American Revolution diorama. One of my favourites was the Battle of the Little Bighorn, because at the show at Round Top we had also taken a Battle of the Little Bighorn to the show. So to see another version of it done by a completely different diorama designer and builder was a big delight. I should mention before I go any further, I forgot to mention earlier, when I was in Atlanta, the joy of going to see the diorama there, not two dioramas, one big diorama which Craig had in his house, was a fabulous 30 square foot, approximately 6 feet by 5 feet model of a French village. I'm assuming it was French. It was basically being defended by a joint force of British paratroopers and American infantry and airborne, being attacked by hordes of Germans along with tanks and armoured personnel carriers and assault guns. Superb. If you ever get a chance to go to Atlanta, get in touch with Craig and make sure you see his. Anyway, by now we were in Charlotte, and I mentioned earlier we visited Dan Nancy's studio and we were able to see what he was doing, and I was also staying with Fred D'Ambrosio. Fred had a completely different from the other guys. He loves ceremonial, and he literally had a huge parade. Again, it looked about 30 square feet, and it had literally hundreds and hundreds of ceremonial figures. And one of Fred's favourites is a Royal Danish Guards, and he had them on parade. And I think that's partly because Fred, when he was still working, he's now retired, had lived and worked in Copenhagen, and that's where he first saw the Danish Royal Guards for real. And when he discovered that King & Country was making them, he became a very loyal and customer and very good friend. So I had a wonderful time there. So obviously over my travels, I covered quite a bit of ground. It was a great experience. I was very fortunate. The weather was beautiful. I must say thank you to Tammy and Christy from Hong Kong head office who assisted us, and also Laura, who came up and helped us with the show at Round Top, and her son Jamie, who did a lot of the heavy lifting and the driving of the all our boxes up to Round Top and back. Anyway, that's enough of my travels. Let's get back to what's actually being released this November. Now, as you can see in front of me, there's quite a collection here. I believe there's certainly well more than 24 figures. So where do we begin? Well, let's begin right at the front here, and you'll see the Magnificent Seven. Now, this is a 7-figure special box set that we produced, and it's a tribute really to one of the all-time great Western movies, aptly called The Magnificent Seven, originally made in 1960, and it was actually adapted from a Japanese film called The Seven Samurai. But anyway, our version is based on the 1960 American film, and it was directed by John Sturges, great movie director who had quite a reputation for doing very good Western films, including Bad Day at Black Rock and Gunfight at the OK Corral. This film here, The Magnificent Seven, it was one of the first to have an ensemble cast of obviously 7 different actors. Now, at that time when the movie was made, the big star and the leader of the 7 was the actor Yul Brynner. But alongside Yul Brynner were several up-and-coming stars. Probably the most famous would be Steve McQueen. Next to Steve McQueen, you'll just see over here, was a young German actor called Horst Buchholz. Now, I've never been able to discover exactly why a German actor ended up in this American Western movie. However, he was good in the movie, so why not? Next to Horst Buchholz, kneeling, holding a pistol, a Colt 45 actually, is the actor Robert Vaughn. Robert Vaughn's most famous part, or thing that he's most known for, is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. television series, where he played a character called Napoleon Solo. But in this instance, he was in the Magnificent Seven playing an American gunfighter. Next to Robert Vaughn is another actor who was just breaking into movies at that time. He'd made a few other movies, but very much small parts, and that was Charles Bronson. Now, Charles Bronson would go on to be a very big star, but it's fair to say that probably this particular movie was his breakout movie. Next to Charles Bronson is a standing figure that whenever you have Trivial Pursuit contests where people are asked to name all the actors in the Magnificent Seven, most aficionados can get at least 6 of the names correct. But the 7th one, he was a well-known actor at the time, mostly television, a few movies, but nobody seems to remember his name, and it took me a long time to find out. And that was an actor called Brad Dexter. So we've got Brad Dexter here, and finally at the very end of the 7 is another guy that went on to great fame and fortune, and that was James Coburn. So this little 7-figure set is one of my all-time favourite cowboy movies, western movies. And I remember when I saw it back in 1961, I think, back in Scotland, it was full of great action, lots of gunfights, and there was no sort of no romance or smarmy kissing or loving or any romantic episodes. It was really all action, and it also had the advantage of having a terrific movie film score by Elmer Bernstein. And if you've forgotten what it sounds like, I'm not going to hum it, I'm not going to sing it, but you can check it out on YouTube. So that's our 7-figure set of the Magnificent Seven, and as you know, we've already got some banditos out to face up to them, and we're also bringing out the figure of Calvera, the Mexican bandit chief, who in the movie was played by a great American character actor called Eli Wallach. So that'll be coming later, but in the meantime, that's the 7. Now, let's move on to this being November, a little annual Christmas set. And here we've got Christmas and His Sledge, and we've got the man himself pulling a little sledge on which is a whole bunch of goodies, and right down the front you've got a mama teddy bear and a little teddy bear at the front. Very cute little set. Makes a great addition if you've been collecting the K&C Christmas sets. I think it's a very worthy addition for 2024. Now we'll move from everything nice to everything a bit more serious in terms of World War II, and we've got Return to Arnhem. Now, as again, many of you will know, K&C first began doing Arnhem figures in 1994, and we released them in 1995. That's virtually 30 years ago, and it was a revolutionary move for King & Country. This was the first complete series that we produced that was all matte painted. They were also slightly larger than the previous figures that we produced, which were mostly standard 54mm scale or 132 scale. And because we were adding a lot more detail in these figures, the sculptor that we had at the time had to make them a little bit bigger, and they became 130 scale, and that's the standard scale that we've basically followed ever since. But I like to say that we were among the first, if not the very first, to produce mass production matte painted figures, because we felt that matte painting was much more realistic for a World War II subject than the traditional high gloss finish that most toy soldiers were being still produced at that time. We've got 14 different figures, and they're split into several 2-man sets, and I think, if I'm right in saying, we've got at least 6 single figure sets as well, 14 in total, and approximately 4 2-man sets. If you look here, you can see we've got a wounded paratrooper being carried by one of his mates. We've got a little 2-figure command set here where they're looking at a map and they're on one of the walkie-talkie radios that most of them didn't really work well in the Arnhem area, but that's another story. And Also down the front here, we've got a two-man Bren gun team, always essential, two-man mortar team, and so that's them. What you'll also see next to these paratroopers, and they all belong to the British 1st Airborne Division, which took part in the Battle of Arnhem. And again, I would think most of you know the story of Operation Market Garden. It was to seize a number of bridges in occupied Holland by the 1st Allied Airborne Army, which consisted of the 101st Airborne Division, American, and also the 82nd Airborne Division and the British 1st Airborne Division. The British were to take the northernmost bridge, which was in the Dutch town of Arnhem, and unfortunately that all came unstuck. Anyway, I won't go into all of the story. You can read up on it. There's lots of terrific videos out at the moment that come out to mark the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Arnhem. And this is our slightly belated tribute to the 1st Airborne Division in Arnhem, and they match perfectly with all those previous releases. And it's nice to go back there because we haven't done any new Arnhem figures in several years. So I think those collectors that have been desperately waiting for reinforcements will be happy with what we've got. Now, in among all of our paratroopers is a little German staff car. Now, some of you will be familiar with that. We actually produced a little staff car like this back in 2015, and very popular it was too, and sold out fairly quickly. We decided, because we had a lot of requests for this, to bring it out again. We thought, well, yeah, let's bring it out again, but let's do something a little bit different. And one of the things we did was we did a little bit of re-engineering, and now this new version has the two front doors on this Citroen staff car can open and close now, which makes it a wee bit more interesting. And we've got two dead Waffen SS officers. I think last time we did it, we did the commandant, the German commandant of Arnhem, who had the misfortune to run into a British patrol and meet a rather grisly end. However, this time round we've made them Waffen SS officers because it was mostly Waffen SS, two Waffen SS divisions that were stationed in Arnhem when the British dropped, that really brought everything to a rather unfortunate end, to say the least. So we thought they would be appropriate for this little set. Moving on from the fatal collision here, right up the top of this little building here is, we're calling it Defending Las Malvinas. Now again, for fans of and collectors of our Falklands Task Force series, we've done several Argentinian figures earlier, but they've been prisoners. We thought it's only fair that we should do some Argentinian defenders. And what we've got here is a little section of 3 Argentinian riflemen in different firing positions that can at least play part of the opposition to our earlier released Goose Green British paratroopers. Anyway, I think you'll like these ones because they've got all the details that you would expect from the previous figures, but they've got some nice little unique touches where if you look on the top of the left hand shoulder of each of these guys, there's a little Argentinian flag patch. You'll also see that they've got camouflage helmets, which some units had, and they're wearing typical Argentine army gear. And when I was doing the research, one of the things I found out that the parka jacket that they're wearing was actually designed for the Israeli Defense Forces. And obviously they'd sold a whole big patch to Argentina sometime before the war, and it became a very iconic piece of the Argentinian uniform. So, little 3-man set of Argentine defenders. And again, for those that have followed the Falklands and know the story, although the Argentinian defenders outnumbered the British, the problem was most of them were conscripts, and many of them only had partial training, and to be honest, they were very ill led by their officers and NCOs. Now, there were some Argentine units in the Falklands, very professional, very well led and fought extremely well, as British casualties show. But the vast majority were just ordinary young men, a lot of them teenagers with very little experience. But anyway, in this case, we thought only fair to show those guys that did do their best to defend their positions, and it makes a nice add-on to the Falkland series. So that's those three guys. Now, what they're standing on, actually, it looks a wee bit out of place, but worth mentioning is our Desert Village Gateway, another new display piece that can go in any kind of desert setting, whether it be ancient Egypt or the desert in North Africa, in during World War II, or indeed any Middle Eastern setting. Now, what makes this little building unique is it's made from a kind of expanded polyurethane, which is very, very strong. And one of the reasons we did that, rather than using a normal polystone, is you get equal amount of detail that you would get in polystone, but it's much less heavy. That means both packaging and transportation costs are much lighter. So that benefits us, but it also, more importantly, benefits the dealers and collectors that are receiving this. So it cuts down on the packaging and posting, and that's always one way to reduce expenses. So that's our little Desert Village Gateway. Another thing that was suggested by collectors a couple of months ago was a fallen knight here, and you'll see this knight here. The horse has come to grief, been hit by several arrows, and the knight himself has actually got an arrow through his chest. The idea came from a suggestion from several collectors who had been buying our latest medieval archers and thought, well, we've got the archers, but we need some more casualties. So this is the first of what will be a series of casualty figures that I hope to bring out later. And again, what we've done is, it was an existing figure, but we thought, let's give it a new colour combination so that a little bit extra variety. So that's the Fallen Knight. So that's really our releases for November. But another release that has to be mentioned is the 2025 calendar. It's all complete, it's ready to be shipped out with your orders, both to dealers and collectors. Got lots of great images, and I'm sure we'll show you some of those images in the video when it gets put together later. But anyway, that will be coming out, and it's available free to most of our collectors, especially those that buy from us direct, but also from all our many dealers around the world. So look out for your edition of the calendar. So that's what's been happening. A very, very busy time, but sadly, there's one other thing I'd like to mention, and that is that while I was in America, I had some very, very sad news, and that was that one of our best toy soldier dealers and a great friend, Brett Williams of the Military Workshop in Brisbane, suddenly passed away. And I was really, I think all of us were shocked and stunned to hear the news. Not just myself, I knew Brett as a very trusted friend and a very good advisor in the toy soldier business, but he also ran a great shop, and he had helped develop King and Country sales and other toy soldier sales in Brisbane, and he had introduced through his shop a lot of collectors to the hobby. We also had another little bit of history between us, is that both of us joined the Royal Hong Kong Police at the same time in 1977. Brett was quite a bit younger than me, and he completed 20 years of service with the Royal Hong Kong Police. And when he left the police in 1997, it was to immigrate down to Australia, where his father was already living. And Brett and his wife and children moved down to Brisbane, and within a relatively short time began the Military Workshop. It was a great store, still is a great store in fact. And he was also instrumental in helping to organise King Country's annual Oz trip to Australia, where virtually every July for the last 15, 16 years, apart from COVID, I would go down to Australia and meet up with our dealers in Australia, visit their shops, and importantly, get to meet and talk with collectors in each of the cities that we visited on the trip. Brisbane was always my first stop. I always looked forward to it. And Brett would greet me at the airport, and unfortunately for him, I used to land very late at night. But we'd go back to the hotel, and throughout the next 2 or 3 nights that I would be in Brisbane, apart from doing all kinds of meet and greets at the shop, and of course the event in Brisbane, we would also have these long late night talks discussing politics, but mostly toy soldiers. And he would give me his comments, but he'd also give me all kinds of great suggestions and ideas, some of which quite a few of which I agreed with. And one of the suggestions, in fact, 2 of the suggestions that you've seen recently, and one of which is right in front of you, came from discussions with Brett, and that was the Magnificent Seven and Black Hawk Down. This to me proves the value of meeting dealers and collectors on a face-to-face basis. And I'll be forever grateful for Brett encouraging me to come down to Australia to help develop Australian subject matter, which was not only popular like the Australian light horse in Australia itself, but actually sold very well around the world. I can't quite believe he's gone. It's so sad, obviously, for all of us at King Country, for all of his friends and collectors that came into the store, but most importantly, of course, for his wife Jerry Lou, who worked with him closely at the store, and his whole family. It's fair to say he'll be truly, truly missed by all of us. And I'm sure I can speak for many of the people watching this that I'd like to pass on my heartfelt condolences and sympathy to Jerry Lou and the family, and wish them all the very best in the future. And just to say that Brett will be sorely, sorely missed by all of us. So I'm sorry to end up in a less than happy note, but it's only fair that his contribution to the hobby and business needed to be acknowledged. So I leave for Europe in a few weeks' time to do an event in Florence, then onto the London show. But before that, I'll also be doing another event in Paris and meeting all our French collectors and dealers there. So there you have it. Enjoy what you see before you, and I'll speak to you next month. Cheers.